I'm John Beaudin from the Aircom Radio Network, coming to you from beautiful Penticton, BC, Canada. I happen to be on vacation, but guess what? Over 16,000 people voted in our ultimate Elton John poll. We are doing the top 50 Elton John songs based on your votes of all time. Number 50 is a gospel ballad released March 20th, 1970. Border Song was about Bernie Taupin's sense of alienation as a country boy when he moved to London. It's from Elton's second album, Elton John, which did not crack the top 40 in Britain, but became a minor hit in North America. In fact, Border Song was his first charting hit in the US. The choir adds a real spiritual feel to the song, almost heavenly. It also really stood out on his huge greatest hits package from 1974. Surrounded by pure pop songs like Honky Cat, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, and Benny and the Jets, it stood on its own as a unique tune. Still, it was a big change from his first album, Empty Sky. Elton John said, "I finally found my voice." And there was a seismic change happening in Bernie's lyrics. Number 49 is Have Mercy on the Criminal, from one of two albums released by Elton in 1973. Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player has 7 tunes in the top 50 countdown. Interestingly, there were only 2 tracks with big orchestration on Don't Shoot Me. The other is Blues for Baby and Me by, of course, the great Paul Buckmaster, who, by the way, is still with us. The tense orchestration in this tune almost opens in midstream. Elton John has said many times, no one did orchestration like Paul Buckmaster. As the title states, it's about someone on the wrong side of the law, on the run. There's a pain in Elton John's voice as he belts out Dogs at Night, chasing some poor criminal. You can really sense the pain and the panic of a man on the run. Nigel Olsson's fills on the songs are his usual less is more, very spacious, and as he hits the drums it sounds like a 1-2 punch of a fighter. There are some bootleg recordings that show that Elton actually performed this song in concert before its release. Maybe too intense to be a single, but its power has never been forgotten by the audience. Number 48 is Pinky, the first of 4 tracks off Elton John's Caribou album. It's a pretty little track. As gentle as it is catchy as some of his slower hits, the hastiness of the session really doesn't show on this laid-back track, considering Elton John and company only had 9 days to record at the Caribou Ranch in Colorado in January 1974, before springing off on a tour to Japan. Also, that was 3 months after the release of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Elton John once called this album pressure because of its time constraints. And now we all know why, but it also shows greatness packs a punch under pressure. The album actually turned 42 years old on June 28th of this year. Caribou was released on the 3rd week of June 1974. It reached number 1 on just its 2nd week on the Billboard Top 200, spending 4 weeks in that position with a total of 54 weeks on the chart. It was his 4th consecutive number 1 in the US, 3rd in the UK, and it also peaked at number 1 in Australia and Canada. Number 47 is Holiday Inn from Madman Across the Water, a simple little tune that sounds like a tip of the hat to a hotel chain. Also, it's the only bright song on a somewhat somber album. Madman Across the Water garnered 1,608 votes, which is exactly 9.5% of 16,894 people who voted for us. Much in the vein of the Captain Fantastic album, which is autobiographical and came out 4 years later, it chronicles a nervous artist, or in this case, Bernie and Elton, 2 nervous artists. Holiday Inn also featured the start of Davy Johnstone with the Elton John Band. Roger Pope is featured on drums, who would later come up again as a band member with Rock of the Westies and Blue Moves 5 years later, along with Caleb Quaye. Holiday Inn features Elton John before he took the big jump into pop, actually literally before he took pop music in a headlock and became Captain Fantastic, or as they called him, the $60 million man. We should remember though, Madman Across the Water is also a reminder that Elton John was great before the hits. And the tunes on Madman certainly have stood the test of time. Number 46, the single Don't Go Breaking My Heart featuring Kiki Dee. Elton John and Bernie Taupin wrote it as sort of a tip of the hat to the great hits of Motown, specifically Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. We should point out that Kiki Dee was the very first British female artist to sign with Motown. Dusty Springfield was originally going to sing it, but she didn't have enough time. It was part of the Blue Move sessions, but not included on the album. It was released June 21st, 1976. 5 months before the first single off Blue Moves, Sorry seems to be the hardest word. It's now a bonus track on the Rock of the Westies album that includes the same band lineup from Blue Moves. It was Elton John's first UK #1 and his 6th in the US. It went to the top of the charts in Australia, Canada, France, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, South America, and Zimbabwe. Don't Go Breaking My Heart has sold over 1 million in the US and the UK. It was also the biggest selling single in the world that year. Number 45, Elton John's ode to the famous singing cowboy Roy Rogers from 1973 and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Bernie's parents actually nicknamed him the Brown Dirt Cowboy, a title that would come back on the autobiographical album Captain Fantastic in 1975. It was just another reminder of the pair's love for Americana themes. He had done this on Tumbleweed Connection and Madman Across the Water with tunes like Burn Down the Mission, Indian Sunset. In fact, if you cherry-picked all the country-flavored songs from Elton John, you could easily fill up an album. There were tunes like Slave from Hunky Chateau, Texan Love Song from Don't Shoot Me, Caribou's Dixie Lily, and the list goes on and on. By the time Elton John was 10, Roy Rogers had already done 100 movies, and his movie career was winding down. Rogers died on July 6, 1998. He was 86. He was honored with 3 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for motion pictures, television, and radio. Bernie and Elton loved the tune's sense of escape from sometimes an unforgiving world. And you can't go wrong with the King of Cowboys fighting for what's right. Number 44 is the last tune from Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, Curtains from 1975. It's another tune from the top 50 that was never a hit. It wasn't even a single. Even though before this, Elton and Bernie had written a lot about their early lives together, this was a true autobiographical project. Deeply personal, it took Taupin even longer to write the lyrics for this one. As he said before, this wasn't anything about chasing a good phrase, having a story to create. This was very, very personal for him and Elton. Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy was the very first album to enter #1 on the Billboard chart's Top 200. It stayed there for 7 weeks. Interestingly, Curtains was once called crap by Elton, but the fans would disagree. Out of 183 studio tracks from the 70s, our poll made it number 44. And I've always thought it was kind of Abbey Road-ish, with We All Fall in Love Sometimes going right into Curtains, very much like Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding. Number 43, Grow Some Funk of Your Own, Elton John with a new band and a rougher sound. Elton even looks like a vagrant on the cover. A happy hobo though. Rock of the Westies, like its predecessor, entered the Billboard charts at #1. At the time, they were the only 2 albums ever to do so. In April 1975, Elton let go longtime drummer Nigel Olsson and bassist Dee Murray, and he brought back old bandmates like Roger Pope on drums and guitarist Caleb Quaye, who last played with Elton on the Madman Across the Water album. Former Joe Walsh bassist Kenny Passarelli was also added, and James Newton Howard was the new synthesizer player. Even though Elton John had a lot of up-tempo tunes, when you look at rock songs, you could basically put on one hand the real heavy ones, like Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, The Bitch Is Back, Love Lies Bleeding, All the Girls Love Alice, and Hercules and Crocodile Rock. In this tune, Elton John sings about waking up beside a shady lady with her boyfriend at the door. And it sounds like he just wants to hit something, most notably Elton. Take my advice, take the next flight, and grow some funk. Grow your funk at home. Number 42, All the Girls Love Alice. It was the first time Elton John sang openly about a gay character. Recorded May 8, 1973 from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, it's a story of a young lesbian who died on the streets of London. Elton says it's about a young girl who gets seduced by naughty ladies. I remember some FM announcers being convinced that this was about Alice Cooper, and even though Bernie Taupin would go on to write with Alice Cooper in 1978, and Elton John knew Alice Cooper at the time, it certainly wasn't about him. The tune also marks the very first time that Kiki Dee appeared on an Elton recording. And even though the song is called All the Girls Love Alice, Elton John actually sings All the Young Girls Love Alice because for the phrasing it worked better. And again, even though it wasn't a hit, a lot of people know this one because it's a favorite in concert. And you gotta love a rocker. Number 41 from 1973, and Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, Teacher, I Need You. It received 1,467 votes. That's 8.6% of the over 16,000 people who voted. This tune always sounded like a hit, but it was never released as a single. When it came to Elton John, especially in the 70s, there was only so much time between the albums. But if you take a close look at Don't Shoot Me, almost every song on this project could have been a hit. And it still gets tons of airplay on FM radio. Coupled with Elderberry Wine back-to-back and starting that side with Daniel, the huge hit, that was a 1-2-3 punch. And who hasn't had a major crush at least once on a school teacher growing up? It's a natural achievement, conquering my homework with her image pounding in my brain. It's a fun retro tune of schoolboy trying to be as cool as John Wayne and Errol Flynn, but it's just not flying. It was a tale of a simpler time when teachers wouldn't have thought of crossing the line. I'm John Beaudin. Make sure you comment on our videos and subscribe to our channel. This is video 1 of 5 videos on the top 50 Elton John songs of all time. Take care.